Hey folks, it's Daniel again, back with Air Down, and what you see here is the truss. I've done the shave kit on the bottom, I've shaved the ring gear, and now it's time to do the truss. The reason why I wanted to do the truss welding last is because if I welded the truss on, it was all, there's a lot of forces trying to pull it up, that when I cut the bottom it would just kind of go whoop. So now with this plate welded on the bottom, a lot of that strength is back. I've done some other things to help it resist that, like weld the truss off of the axle, and I'm just going to do the last bit of welding on the actual tubes. I am getting a little bit of float off of the axle tubes front and back now, and I bet you it's because of some of the tack welding I've done in like these corners and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just look around, identify spots where I'm floating these vertical guys, eliminate as much of that as I can, and I'm not going to get it perfect, but get it really close, and that way I can just tack weld it really well and just weld it without really worrying about any kind of warpage. One quick update: after the ring gear shave, my Milwaukee died shortly after, my angle grinder that I've had for a millennia it seems, and so in its place I bought two brand new ones, and I got these because they were on sale at Home Depot. I'm not a brand loyalty guy, so I'm just gonna walk around and check things out, and if you see a bunch of my butt crack in this episode, I apologize in advance. But I feel like just getting these knocked out will be a big help right off the bat. This whole side and the front is actually really good. The back not so much, but even then my gap really isn't that big. Well, I just wiped off a bunch of that orange marker onto my jacket somewhere, it looks like. Schmoof. I've got my first round identified. I'm going to pull them off now and modify. So I'm going to scoot you back. Just so you know, right now, March 16th, and the coronavirus has basically shut down my city, but I'm still at work. I may have lost that last little bit of footage because it doesn't seem like my GoPro is responding to voice commands very well today. So, if so, I apologize. I just ground out all those little trouble areas that I marked, and now I'm doing a new test fit. So, time to give it the look around. Boy, all along this front is really great. I don't think you could get a whole lot better than that. I've kind of now lightly floated this whole outside bit, so that's not 100% great, but it's really not a bad deal either. Even the back is much, much closer. Boy, just that one little bit of trimming on that side made a huge difference. I know a lot of people don't do stuff like this, and that's like, I don't know, that's fine. And their stuff works for them, so good for them, but man, I paid a lot of money for this stuff, and I really want it to turn out nice. Wow, this is basically touching all along, and then all along the back is a whole lot better than it was. I got a lot more confidence in welding this thing now. Right here, on both sides, this is where it's starting to contact, is on this bit of a plate here. So I'm just gonna ever so lightly bevel those edges, just a really quick strafe. And I think that will, and then knock this little guy down. I think that'll set this whole truss right down on the tubes. Boy, that was nice and quick. All along from like here to here, this plate is sitting square on the tube. Along the back, we're really close everywhere I look. And we're touching again most of the back side of this loop where it goes over the axle. This is still touching and floating a little bit. And it looks like in here is touching too. So we'll shave those down slightly. I could weld it right now. This fitment is excellent. Well, I feel like we're really splitting hairs now, which is exactly the territory I want to be in. Yeah, it's quite close, so just a really good tack-tackaroo everywhere I go. And even then, just by pulling on this, I can make the back touch, so how about that? It seems like if I could just clamp these corners down. Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll just meat clamp this corner down, and that corner too, before I start tacking, and that'll help even more. And so I'm gonna paint the inside of this all up in here, which means I gotta clean it too. Just mark where this truss sits, wire wheel just the spots I need, and then paint or zip it. But I also think I want to weld the tubes to the center sections first. You might have just seen me pull this bolt out of this hole, and that's because when I welded down here, that bolt is right below that weld, and the weld punched through into the threads. So I assembled the cover, and I used the cover as a template, and I just drilled through all of that weld and stuff. And I'm just gonna rip the cover off, and I'm gonna helicoil that spot. No big deal. Okay, I've got my welder all set up with Nicor. I've got it on a setting that I think is gonna work. That Nicor allows me to not have to preheat, but I'm going to preheat anyway, just in case. It does help it wet a little bit and stuff like that. That wire weld's weird. It likes to stack up on itself, but it wets into the surface well. So I don't need to go nuts here. I just need to get enough in there to keep the tubes from wanting to rotate. Which I already have the truss and the dip cover, so it's not going to really be an issue, but might as well just do it for safety's sake. Alright, have a quick look and then I'm going to cover it with a blanket. This is the better bit here, so that's when I kind of started to get the hang of it. It looks like it wants to have the nozzle pointed way out in front of the weld, or angled way out in front. This is my first one when it was a little chilly still. So it did stack up. Like, this stuff really loves to stack up. And it looks super cold, but it's not. It's just ridiculously hot. And you can see it wetting into the surface really well. So, I don't know. Strange stuff, the way it welds, for sure. But this is the best run of it here, right on the lower part of the front at least. This bit looks okay, so we'll take it. I don't know if you can see much definition there, but anyway, that's that. Now I'm going to put a blanket on it and do the other side, and I'll spare you the other side since you already know what's going on. Well, I got the pressure washer out and it's purging the air bubbles right now, and I'm going to clean the daylights out of this housing is what's going to happen. I got a bunch of little metal I got a bunch of metal stuff in there from shaving that ring gear, so my job now is to there's no way you're gonna see it. My job now is to blast all that junk out, as well as other old junk. So that's what I'll be doing. Today is a day that I've been waiting for a while. This truss is getting welded onto that rear axle, and it's going to be such an incredible day indeed. You'll see I painted the inside and I just freaking hosed it in there. It's actually kind of cool not caring about runs or drips and just blasting paint into something. And the point behind that was trying to just get paint in all those little cracks and crevices up in here and seal them off the best I could. So now it's time to clean that axle, and then once it's clean and dry, I'll bring it in here. I'll mark the lines because I painted the top of the axle tube as well. I'll mark the lines where these sit. I'll clean my surfaces so I'm not welding paint into my weld pools. And then once we're down to clean, dry metal, we'll hose it on. So pretty exciting. It's gonna be a good day. Not too bad for a social distancing day. It usually takes me quite a few pulls to start this thing, so we'll see how obnoxious it is today. Well, I feel soaked. My pants and shoes are definitely soaked. I don't care, whatever. It's a nice day. But if 2700 psi, the yellow 15-degree tip, doesn't handle it, then this is never going to get clean. But I doubt there's any way you could really see in there, but oh, she clean as a whistle. All right, back in the garage we go. Okay, the axle's back on the stands in the garage. It's dry, the cover is back on, and the truss is bolted on. And I got one more step before I mark these out and start welding. And this is going to be an oddball, but the point of these is to help draw the truss down. What I'm going to do, as soon as I get rid of that burr, I'm going to weld these. They're tapered, or angled, you can see slightly. I just cut them out with a chop saw. I'm going to weld them on like this, and then I'm going to use this ratchet strap, which has a funky long ratchet handle on it, and I'm going to slide them in here, and I'm going to ratchet down around the axle, because even just pushing by hand on this, especially on like the ends, the truss conforms to the axle better. And I don't know if it's because of these bolts or if there's one little thing hanging it up here or there. So I plan on ratchet strapping these down to tack weld, and then maybe even do a couple of little welds. And then that'll be our best fitment possible. And again, at this point I'm probably splitting hairs, but let's split them. Can't hurt. I'm also switching from a hat to a welder's cap because the new helmet puts it kind of grabs around the back of your head instead of up high like my other one, and so the hat wasn't playing nice with it. But it's about time I got some legitimate stuff anyway. Alright. I don't know how much of a difference this made. I can still see some pretty big gaps, and I think it's because of the black paint that I can really see those gaps now, whereas before I couldn't. So, oh well, I'm sure plenty of people welded trusses on with little gaps and they're okay too. So I'm planning on running like the 3/16 setting on this and not going super hot. It's gonna stick. It's gonna get good penetration because I have a little wedge in here I can weld into. So that's not the issue. I don't need to nuke it. So I'll just tack weld in a bunch of spots, probably a ridiculous amount of spots. And then sure, it'll be fine. But now it's time to mark out where it lies. The whole point of it is to just cover as much of the material as I can before I weld the truss on and I can't reach anymore with paint. It's like you're not going to be able to stick the nozzle of the spray can in here and get good coverage. I'm painting now so I can be one step ahead of rust forming in all of these little spots. This is so metal that it'll never rust through, especially not in a dry climate, but you get that nice black paint on here and little like orange rust streaks over time. I don't want any of that. I guess I should also mention that 70-6 wire that I'm using in the welder, just the normal steel wire, is good for busting up a little paint and a little bit of rust and a little bit of grime. You certainly don't want to drown it in paint, which is why I'm removing the paint. But it's good for at least a little bit. So if I was running 70-2, I would have to have very, very clean metal, but this is going to work fine for me. Please don't kill me. These metal pipes make for very convenient handles. You can steal that idea if you want. Here's that orange paint outline. It's actually a very good outline. I should go into crime scene investigation. So now I'm just going to remove paint in these general areas and try and leave some in the middle. Well, it might have been a giant waste of time, but I've got my black stripe down each axle tube. And, you know, it cost me an extra $5 or $6 and an extra hour worth of time, so it might have been a waste of time, but I don't know. Keeps me from laying awake at night and asking what if. Okay, now I just got to get the paint off of the edges here, and we're good to go. Oh, this thing doesn't get any lighter. This axle's gonna be ridiculous with this on there. Unimaginably heavy. Alright, it is just freaking go time. It's time to do it. No more lollygagging. So what I'm gonna do is tack weld the daylights out of it. But the first thing I want to tack is places I know it's touching. So here and here on both sides. And then here and here in these corners on both sides. And then once those are done, I can come and do these ones I know are floating. Alright, well that's pretty well tack welded. So I'm going to pop these straps off now. I don't see the need to run a full bead across this face. Probably not against this face either. That's a lot of weld. It's just not necessary. So I think I'm going to put tack welds where I want to plan to start and end each bead. littler ones this time. They don't need to be so big. Alright. This one, I don't know. I'll probably weld this whole one because it's just, otherwise it'd be two really short beads. We're just going to run this whole one. But the rest of them are just going to run partials. I think I'm going to get my wire brush and just clean this up a little bit and then just spray a little PAM on it. Just to keep the spatter down. When you weld an axle truss onto an axle like this, it usually wants to smile up. And that's because all of this is contracting, which is tweaking the axle up. So, I figure if I weld in here on, say, this front side, then switch over to that side, then switch over to this side, then switch over to that side, all next to the pumpkin, it's going to try to squeeze this material up while the rest of this is pushing down, and it'll probably want to make it do the opposite. So I'm going to be like fighting the different ways that I pull tension on this pipe. And I think if I weld from the inside out, it'll be more likely to want to frown as this wire, or as this welding is hot, and making it want to smile. I'm going to do this bead in two segments. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to back step and run into it. Well, why waste the time while I'm waiting, so I'm just going to cut these pipes off. Looks like I'm going to have to practice some karate chop. What I meant to say was some karate chop. So here it is, folks. A ballistic truss welded onto a ballistic shaved 10.5 with the tie-in cover. Pretty freaking dope. I mean, super dope. So let's have a quick look at the welds. There's not a single weld that I'm like bummed out about at all. They're all pretty dang good. So, can't really whine. Could have done better on some of my start stops. Could have done better tying into my tack welds when I started and ended. See if I can tilt this forward and get a little light on these. About near the end, I started to really catch my groove on segmented beads. Actually, it looks like I pretty much did the segmenting all the way through, no problem. But I think anybody would be proud to have this truss welded up like that. I certainly am. So that's it for tonight. There's really nothing else to say besides subscribe to this. I'm gonna do more stuff like this. These axles are going on my Durango. They're gonna be my family crawler. So I guess in the meantime, peace out. Go rock crawling.